So hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the balancing issues behind Master Duel. So let's just get right into it. So if we look at Altergeist, what year exactly was Altergeist released in? I'm not even sure. It was just ancient as far as I'm concerned, and that's a good enough answer for me here. But yeah, either way, this deck I'm pretty sure is older than 5 years. And if we were to take like a pre-support variation of Altergeist, so we'll just slap quote unquote full power Altergeist, like it's not going to be the best deck out there, right? But the thing is, even if it's not the best deck out there, simply because if we go first, we are going to be able to win this duel. It doesn't fully matter. Well, not yet at least, that our opponent is on whatever deck. So in this case, our opponent could be on, we'll say, Malice. Then, we can cook Malice because, try to activate Malice in the Mirror, negate that. Malice in the Underground, negate that. Or actually, with Malice in the Mirror, we could even ignore this. Depends. And then every single one of the traps here, we can get rid of this. And then if you were to summon any of your, like, guys, any extra deck monsters, we can bounce that. And we can also potentially negate and destroy those as well to send them to the graveyard while we're here, That's like a thing you could kind of do with certain kind of cracked hands. But basic idea here is if we go first, our win rate is going to be much better than if we were to go second. And this just applies to basically like most decks just in Yu-Gi-Oh! Follow this kind of principle. But because of this enables decks that are older to actually still be playable even much later. For example, like Zodiac, I don't think is going to be like super cracked, right? But if we play Zodiac kind of in that control kind of style where we have like a bajillion one card starters and then you have a bunch of like well, it's either going to be solemns or you have hand traps like Droll, Ash Blossom, Imperm, potentially like I guess you could do Pistols as well. It doesn't really matter. Basic idea here is that you're just going to have a bunch of guys and a bunch of like annoying either hand traps or cards that will shut down your opponent's plays. Like you could even play, I guess, like a rivalry if you really want to. But yeah, this strategy also pretty damn viable as long as you go first. If you go second, like there's certain decks that just will completely be able to tank all the hand traps you're playing because you're not, for the most part, going to be, well, it depends, I guess, but you're not going to be just like super prepared for one specific deck, right? So, for example, maybe with, I don't know, with Orcust, they're going to be completely fine against your Drone Lockbird, and maybe if we're playing yet another deck, so in this case we'll go with Malice, they're going to be fine against your Drone Lockbird, they'll be fine against your Ash Blossom Joe Spring, Infinite Impermanence, they can tank that as well. Maybe they just can't tank like Solemn, but you're going second, so your Solemn's dead in hand, right? Basic idea, just got kind of drill this in. If you're going first, you have the advantage. And this advantage can be used to make it so older decks, even those that have not yet gone support, despite being like kind of ancient and kind of outdated. So we can go with like Tri Brigade as well, or Eldlick at this point is kind of Eldlick. What Eldlick can just completely cook you, assuming they go first. But I mean, if they are going second, their deck is actually pathetic and does absolutely nothing and can't resolve like a single effect. And they don't have any response for you going second because they have to put so much more engine because their decks usually at this point in time, it'll be like the older we go, the less consistent decks will be. So you'll need to run more combo pieces and not be able to fit in as much non-engine. And that matters specifically for mostly if you're going second, because you just don't have any plays for going second. But for going first, I mean, eh, you might, well, it depends on exactly what the deck does, but you might get completely cooked by hand traps as well. If your opponent is able to run enough hand traps to, just stop you from being able to do anything at all, there is technically that threat. But if you do get combo off in general with a going first deck, you're just going to win the duel, even if the deck is older. So the advantage in going first is just pretty insurmountable at this point, I'm feeling. And there's not a whole lot you can do. I'm not 100% sure exactly at what point in Yu-Gi-Oh's lifespan that became so going first heavy, where like going first just gave you such a massive advantage. I guess to an extent there was a point in the start where it would be advantageous as well because you drew for a turn, so you actually would be starting with 6 cards in hand, and then your opponent would have 5 cards. Which, I mean, if we did that now, like, do you know how even more toxic going first would be if you had an additional card on top of already going first versus your opponent's like 5 card hand? You have 6 cards. Like, think of modern Yu-Gi-Oh that way. That hurts, man. Like, wow. But yeah, I think one of the main issues with if we did nerf going first, then a lot of these like rogue decks and such, or older decks, they're just not going to be viable at all. And I'm not thinking in the terms of like competitively viable, because even at the moment they're not going to be, but they're going to be even less viable than they are now. So for example, if we look at support Blue Eyes, like you can win games with this. Actually, this isn't even that great of an example. I think there's probably a better one out there, right? I guess we'll go with let's see, something old and no one really plays that much, but it used to be good. Oh, right, Orcus, but pre-support. A lot of this is going to be pre-support because I just didn't really prepare examples ahead of time. I mean, sometimes I do, but all right. The old Orcus N board that you would be able to do from normal summon Girsu, I believe was something like you end on it should be the field spell, and then you have Dingirsu in the graveyard, and then you have access to Dingirsu because you have a Orcus Nightmare in the graveyard. So the idea is to go on your opponent's turn, it should be Orcus Nightmare. Since Harp special summons like it should be Girsu. Girsu effect will then be able to send a guy to bring back Dingirsu. That's it, right? And while you're there, I think you also have the idea of you have 2 things you can potentially do, I think, right? It's IP, where you use the special summon Girsu, or you could technically use the Dingirsu as well to then go ahead and make SP. And this is what you were doing, like pre-support, but like even if you didn't have SP, you had Nightmare Unicorn. If we go back a little bit further, depends where you want to go, I guess. And then you discard a card, shuffle back one of your opponent's cards, whatever, right? And you also have a Verte, I believe, with a, well, you didn't have Dragoon with Nightmare Unicorn, so I guess it would just be Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, right? So it's how many pieces of interactions? Like 1, 2, 3 ish, and that's actually genuinely enough to win the game. And maybe you have like 1 hand trap, maybe for like 4 interactions, and like there are decks that can play through this many interactions, but also there are decks that just can't. I mean, in terms of what some other end boards do, like this is pretty underwhelming. Even if we actually replace the unicorn here with an SP, that's like 5-ish interactions. I think that's like, I'm not 100% sure if this was a 1-card combo or like a 2-card combo, but I want to say something close to this effect was a 1-card combo. So yeah, that's it. That's all you're getting here, right? And if you go second with the same deck, of course, I normal summon Girsu, it dies to 1 interaction. So, you know, with your 9-ish interactions, like closing on nearly double-digit interactions, where if I get hit on my single choke point, I just lose the game. Yeah, I lost because I went second, basically. But also, if you think about it in a different way, that starter that your opponent needed to play, it also dies potentially, right? To something that we might make on our end board, right? Which causes this thing where we can technically assign values to cards. Like, technically, this gear suit, if it resolves everything following it, this is going to be, we'll say, 5 interactions. We have, we'll say, Dormouse, and we'll just slap on a random number and say, this gives you 9 interactions off of just normal summon Dormouse, and you resolve everything. But also, this is an ignition effect, which you can easily just remove from the field. And then it does hot nothing. So that's kind of the weird game state we find ourselves in a little bit here. Well, it's not like exactly 1-for-1, but the general idea here is that you have a limited number of starters, and the quality of your starters are going to be usually lower in the older decks, and you're not going to have as high quality extenders as well, if you have any at all, in which case, like Pierre Orcus. Your extension play here is you need 3 cards, so you need like some Orcus monster to send to the graveyard, hopefully a relevant one, and then you have Orchestrated Return to send it into the graveyard, and then you inactivate it. That's all you can hope for, really. A bit sad, but it is what it is. But also, like, a single Dormouse is not that much better than like a single Girsu in terms of just a raw normal summon, right? And if I go first, do normal summon Dormouse, I'll probably win. If I do normal summon Girsu versus like the other deck in this case, then you'll probably win because this is not that good if you have like close to the same quality of hand, right? Like you drop Droll and Lockbird, I drop a Cold Buy, yada yada, and this is the only starter we have each. You know, it's like hooked, basically, for both sides. So it's just a matter of just, I guess, the fact that if you could actually look at it a different way, the Orcus end board is still a lot weaker than maybe the Malice end board, right? In terms of interactions, at least, where you would have like 9 interactions, they'd be layered or something. With Orcus here, you have still 5 interactions, which is more or less an interaction for every single card in your opponent's hand, and presumably maybe a hand trap to trade off like the 6th card. So we'll generously say you have maybe 6 interactions for your opponent's hand, which means they can't really play through this because you have an interaction for literally every single card in their hand, assuming they didn't drop a hand trap on you, or if that hand trap was relevant. And then if you have Called by the Grave or Ash Blossom Dress Ring to potentially trade off whatever hand trap they attempted, which is also a factor, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, it's incredibly cooked, I would say. What else do we have here? Let's see. So, if we're going by like modern versus modern as well, this issue, it's still here, I guess, right? So if we have like our Ryzeal starters and all that, these aren't that cracked, surprisingly enough, if we're just focusing on the engine here, right? We have special summon X Ryzeal. You know, I'll just destroy this. And then what are you going to do? You're going to add sword? I'll negate destroy sword. I'll negate destroy ice. And then that's 3 interactions that trades off for every single one of your starters. So easy enough, I guess, right? To just beat Ryzeal that way. Just 3 interactions. I mean, if you look at what we have for in theory like Orcus end board, yeah, that's the 5 interaction right there. We only need 3. So even if you were to mirror logic aggregator remove one of our interactions, we still have enough to just win, basically. So yeah, that's a bit cooked, isn't it? But if we look at Ryzeal, same thing. Ryzeal goes first. Then they have like a bajillion detonator pops, and also like cross negate, and then you attach more material onto detonator. So it's somewhere like maybe 8-9 interactions, something like that. Maybe more. It doesn't really matter. I guess you have Plasma Hole, which is an interaction that slaps another interaction onto detonator with a get by giving it another pop. So that's like 2 interactions by itself. But yeah, you weren't able to play through like 1 or 2 interactions anyways. Like I think 2 is close to the hard limit to what Orcus could play around before. So I mean that's the case for Orcus, but if we also go look at like Malice versus like Ryzeal, there are only so many Malice starters, so yeah. We'll pop Underground. We'll pop your normal summon, I guess. And then whatever you summon off of Gold Sark, we could potentially pop that also, leaving you with, I guess in this case it'd be presumably no play. And that doesn't change with Modern either, realistically. So I think one of the glaring issues at this moment in time is just like the inability for most decks to just go second. They just don't have tools for going second. Like the only thing we've been given is Typhon, pretty much. That's generically playable. But you know, Typhon is not that strong. Arguably, Typhon could be stronger because going second is such an insane disadvantage. But if we make decks later on better at going second, Typhon actually would be an issue as well, just forever, if we made Typhon too strong. So it kind of goes both ways, I guess, where we make a card too strong, that's problematic. If it's not strong enough, that's also a problem. I guess it could be hard to hit the balance regarding this, but just from a game balance kind of like standpoint, any deck that's going first, right? Like X Ryzeal is going to be basically going second. Well, it's not going to be X Ryzeal specifically. That'd be more like Ice or Sword Ryzeal. But you can think of those cards as you need to drop 1 interaction on them to stop that card, and then going first, that card would have dropped like 9 interactions by itself. So it's crazy, but also not crazy and obvious. Like going second, you're dealing with a guy who went first, where they were the ones to instead drop the 9 interactions with their like combo. So yeah, that's basically the problem somewhat, and I think it's hard to resolve to an extent because if we did make the newer decks able to go second much better, then the older decks would not be able to keep up with them at all. So ideas of making cards like Typhon, I think it's somewhat more reasonable, because then both kind of decks here, the older ones and the newer ones, will be able to then go second more efficiently, and it won't be like, I guess if we were to compare, I guess like very much GOAT cards to modern cards, where they just get insanely gapped and it's not even close, right? So for example, if we look at, we'll go with we'll go with Dark Hole. Like Dark Hole's pretty good, right? But if you think about it in terms of like GOAT decks, right, we could also just use Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, and the difference between this is, it wouldn't be as big of a deal now, but if I give you Gamma Seal and I have Thunder King, the Lightning Strike Kaiju, and I outed your board of whatever you had, now you have to deal with this Lightning Strike Kaiju, and this would be a legitimate problem, right? And you don't have an out for this, probably, in your deck unless you top deck it, because that's how I guess like older Yu-Gi-Oh kind of worked more. You don't really have your answers in the extra deck because you don't really have much of an extra deck if it exists at all. And yeah, that's kind of how it went, I guess. Where, well, what am I trying to say here? Well, concrete, basically, yeah. Where you basically have an older version of a card, and then you just have the same card basically, but better. That's what would potentially end up happening, and then that relegates these cards to being kind of useless. So I mean, in this case at least, Kaiju Slumber has one downside, so or several downsides because it's modern Yu-Gi-Oh versus if you were to play this in like a Go format. So first off, you can Ash Blossom Joe Spring this. Secondly, this has two special summons tied to it, which opens you up to a earlier Nibiru potentially. So there's two reasons that Kaiju Slumber can kind of suck. I mean, you do have the ability to add a Kaiju as well, which is worth mentioning on a later turn, which is also pretty insane, honestly. But yeah, it's just to an extent, like if Ash Blossom and Nibiru did not exist, right? Then Dark Hole is just a card where you'd be wondering, why am I playing this instead of playing Interrupted Kaiju Slumber? And that's kind of the worry, I guess. They might have, I'm not sure, with making like certain cards like too strong, where it just invalidates certain cards, right? So that's probably why there aren't that many decks with the ability to go second well, and also going first as like engine, right? The only case where this has been, I think it was just a disaster, really. It was just Tearlament, right? Where you were able to use your engine and non-engine going first as well. And this just gaps everything because nothing else could do this. So you basically play Tearlament, or you're just going to get dogged by Tearlament. Because Tearlament was the only thing at the same power level as Tearlament much, right? That, or you just play Shifter and simply open Shifter, I guess. But yeah. Game balance is hard, I guess. But at the same time, man, going first is so disgustingly strong that honestly, I think I win, like, personally. I don't have, like, the data for other people, but in general, if I'm actually trying to play a deck somewhat competitively, then my win rate is going to be like around 90 to 80% going first, and then going second, it's probably around like 50-40%. Like, it's pretty ridiculous, the amount of differential here, right? And this doesn't account for, of course, like, if I have like Dark Hole, that could be taking up the slot of like an Ash Blossom that I could be playing instead, right? And then there's the idea of Ash Blossom being better going first, and going second, it's still okay. Maybe in we'll say this format that we're currently playing, Dark Hole is going to be better. But if I go first, Dark Hole's completely dead. So there's that issue as well. And this is also Master Duel, so it's best of one. So side deck ain't a thing. So why would I play Dark Hole when Ash Blossom and Joe Spring is going to be more useful in general? Just most of the time, Ash Blossom would be useful, I guess, right? Or at least usable. So that's like, honestly, Ash Blossom Joe Spring, you can activate this card, I swear, like close to 90% of the time. Like, you can even use this against stun, technically, right? I guess Dark Hole works against stun exactly as well. But yeah. Well, not against if they have like skill drain, I suppose. It's situational still, but yeah. It's just kind of complicated, I suppose, where if you take into account like hand traps as well, I think it would be helpful slightly. I don't know how helpful. I would have to like think on it a little bit more, maybe. if we had hand traps specifically for going second, more so, like, well, Charmies are kind of close to this, where they're not really usable if you were playing either a back row deck or a combo deck. Going first, you're going to need to like set your trap cards, which makes Charmies not activatable, or if you do a combo, this is just going to be sitting in your hand doing nothing, right? So in that regard, the Charmies are like not that bad, I guess. But then if they're better cards, well, why would I be playing these Charmies necessarily, right? Like with Maxi. So yeah, this card, no restrictions. I can use this much more freely, and the effect is just better in like numerous ways. So there's that aspect. I guess the card would have to be like fairly powerful. I guess this card was decent. Um, we have like Gordian Slicer, which there would be no point in using this except for going second specifically. At the start of your main phase 1 or 2, target any number of face-up cards on the field. For each targeted card, banish 1 card from your hand or 6 cards from your extra deck face down, then return those targeted cards to the hand. So this effect, pretty insanely strong, I guess. But also if I'm going first, like, for the most part, because, you know, going first is better, you do just want to go first over going second, right? So why would I play a card that I would need to be in a worse position for? So it's like playing, I guess, Dark Hole instead of Kaiju Slumber, despite Kaiju Slumber being maybe better. So you're putting yourself in a worse position to play a card that isn't necessarily going to be that great. And then, you know, it's best of one. So what if, so we'll look at it this way, I guess. So let's say I am going first with Ash Blossom Joy Spring. I have Ash Blossom Joy Spring for the next turn. If I have Gordian Slicer, this does nothing. Basically, I'll probably lose the game and get OTK'd on the next turn. Maybe. Or it will do nothing and I will still win the duel. That's potentially the options we're looking at here, I guess. And then with Ash Blossom Joy Spring going second, this could potentially stop my opponent's full combo. This is better than Ash Blossom Joy Spring because this could break my opponent's entire board. But, you know, I do want to go first over this. If I were to prefer going second for some reason, this would be better then. But as we all know, like going first, for example, if we look at the Orcus cards, Girsu converts to like 5 interactions. If I were going second with Girsu, then it dies to 1 interaction as well. So my opponent being able to convert 1 card into so many interactions, just 1 interaction, if that remains, even after I drop down Gordian Slicer, a single interaction, I have no play and I just get cooked, basically, right? But, you know, if I play Ash Blossom Joy Spring, it does thing going first, and thing going second. And this can help support, technically, my going first a little bit as well, with the ability to negate, like, Maxi, for example. Or if I were to play Called by the Grave, this is just going to be able to stop some things and support my going first plays more. Versus, like, Gordian Slicer, which I have to play for exclusively going second. Called by the Grave, honestly, is fine for going second. It's not like the best card. Like, sometimes it comes up and it's useful, sometimes it doesn't. So that card is kind of like wishy-washy as well. I would have to analyze a lot more cards to really paint the full picture here, but yeah, essentially, going first is more fun anyways, as well, right? So if I were doing a Malice full combo versus if my opponent is doing a Malice full combo, yeah, I mean, you'd rather be the one doing the combo than being comboed on. The reason I say maybe is because, like, in Malice full combo, you could potentially, like, draw into hand traps and such, and then you can just still not play, basically. So let's say we're playing Malice Mirror, and you do have Gordian Slicer, and we'll just assume Gordian Slicer outs your opponent's entire board. They do whatever, and then all of a sudden, oh, crap. They have Lancia. You sat through all of this for nothing, yeah? Or in this case, well, we could even go back in time and say, like, you're playing against Brandon. You drop Raigeki. This outs their entire board. And then, I don't know. It doesn't really matter from here, right? Because let's say, I guess in this case, you're also playing Branded. So you activate Branded Fusion, and then your opponent just drops Ash Blossom Joe Spring on you. So you're not necessarily even guaranteed anything with like the going second cards here. But if you were going first in this case, then you might also lose because Ash Blossom Joe Spring. But also because you're playing Raigeki, you actually arguably are in a worse spot because your opponent might have like the ability to do an OTK line instead of whatever they did. And you only had Raigeki, meaning you still lose. So going second cards, they could be useful or they could be useless. Like in some situations, you might be looking at board and thinking, damn, I wish I had Dark Ruler No More right about now. But if you were to actually play Dark Ruler No More, you might also be thinking, damn, I wish I sure didn't have Dark Ruler No More in my hand right now. And yeah, that's the problem with going second cards, basically. Well, cards for specifically going second and nothing else. If they were hand traps, I guess it helps a little bit more because you don't want your opponent to like go off too hard because it can genuinely be impossible to break certain boards. So let's assume you're playing a deck with only board breakers, no hand traps, and maybe you're playing, I don't know, let's say Maxi. You just gave your opponent free reign to do basically whatever they want in the game. If you're staring down like Jinzo equipped with what's it called? Don't even remember the name of the card. With Amplifier and then Mask Restrict, staring down like what's his face? Last Warrior from Another Planet, and like I guess it wouldn't be Spell Canceler in this case, and there might be like I guess let's say a Secret Village on the field, and there's like some kind of spellcaster, yada yada. It's basically just an unbreakable board where you can't activate anything or do anything. You would just be cooked, and that'd be something they could realistically do, assuming that there was for some reason a meta deck that only played specifically going second cards and nothing else. Then yeah, this would become viable all of a sudden. And believe me, I'm pretty sure there's a consistent one card way to do this, or several one card ways to do some kind of board like this. So not great, I guess. So yeah, going first, you can prevent your opponent from playing. Going second, your opponent gets like still to play on your turn as well. So overall, if we're looking at it from a different perspective, even from like a fun standpoint, like you could argue about like what's fun and what's not, but the going first player gets to play more so than the going second player. That's because you can do your combo and then you get your interactions on your opponent's turn. Meanwhile, if you're going second, you could try some interactions, like you can try dropping some hand traps. That's about it. And then your opponent also plays on your on your turn when you are going second. So basically, your opponent, I would argue, is playing. Assuming you are going second, your opponent is playing twice as much as you are. So there's also that aspect as well, where you're not both actively participating in the game, which kind of sucks. I mean, if you really call this interaction to begin with, it's like, my opponent is activating a Luber. Do I Ash Blossom Joe Spring this? Nah, I think that's fine, My opponent is now activating Branded Fusion. I guess I'm glad I held for this because my opponent actually used a Luber to add Branded Lost. And Branded Lost can not protect from Ash Blossom on Branded Fusion. And then, your opponent drops like Cult by the Grave on Ash Blossom Joe Spring, and it's like, oh, everything I was thinking about, it didn't matter. I could have dropped this, at any point, just anywhere, and it wouldn't have done anything great. It might have arguably been more impactful to just drop it on a looper, just to have the information. Maybe. I guess if you had an imperm as well, then you could prevent Reddit loss from being searched and then like try imperm on Albion. I think you have a play after that. I'm not 100% sure if you do or not. But you can send Albion potentially with Lubellion. And then I'm not sure what Albion searches here. But if it does search combo, then I mean, yeah, you really have a lot of nothing here. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.